Welcome to the Candy Shop Show. We're part of the Diamond Network. It's April 6th. We've got a great show lined up for you this evening with Julien Wells from Seattle. And we got some exciting things that he is going to be sharing. Besides being friends with many Pleiadians and communicating with those on their mothership, he's recently been talking with Leonara. And we're going to hear some interesting things about those communications. Before we get deep into these far-out topics, let me open the candy jar treats and say, first, let me remind my audience that on my last March Candy Shop show, Chris Jacobs and Odin and Raoul Tim from the Bird Tribe were on board and helped to heal the Vatican area in Italy, and they set the groundwork for taking control of the Earth's power grid away from the cabal. Now, when this happened last Wednesday, they said that everybody in the States would, if they were aware, to be noticing that what they might see would be a quick power flicker. You know how your televisions might go off for a few minutes. And that could be the point at which the power grid is taken away from the cabal, and the good guys would be in charge. So we're looking forward to that. Benjamin Fulford has some really interesting things. You know, he's talking about the signs that Russia might have a brief war with Turkey, and that the American military pulled their families out of Turkey and made it clear that they were going to have a hands-off attitude if Russia and Turkey become engaged in the process of taking down one of ISIS's strongholds. Well, he's talking a lot about the Japanese and the Korean royal families, and some negotiations there, talking about the $300 million that went missing, and that a Rothschild is being questioned in regard to that. There was an interesting tugboat incident in Indonesia. The Ukraine is still controlled by Israel and is bankrupt. The USA, of course, had a big data dump, the Panama Papers. And there was a so-called nuclear security conference in D.C. last week, but Russia didn't show up, so it wasn't really a summit. The real summit was with the U.S. and China and Russia about the new money system, and they're fighting back and forth. China says they won't recognize our paper, and the West says we're not going to recognize your gold unless. And so maybe they're going to come to some kind of an agreement for the good of all. The Chinese are saying they're going to invest $50 trillion. I can't imagine such a number for a new power grid globally. And so those kinds of exciting things we can look forward to in our future. And there's lots of sources online that are saying that, yes, Benjamin Fulford is finally getting good sources, and so his material can be more reliable. Well, listen, I'm going to wrap up the Candy Jar Treat segment, and I'm glad to welcome people everywhere to our show this evening with Julien Wells. He is very interested in the human life cycle, timelines, synchronicities, and 5D experiences that we've been talking about briefly but he's going to go deep into these. And so, Julien, welcome.
Hello. Thank you for having me in the show this week.
Great. Well, you're welcome to start off wherever you'd like on those topics.
Okay. Well, anybody who's been following me with my YouTube channel, where I've been sharing a lot of material on that sort of subject, including my own weekly show, which runs Tuesdays. In case anybody wants to follow that, you can get the links and the times at julienwells.com, and Julien is spelled with an E. So JulienWells.com. I was thinking that tonight I could summarize a bunch of really potent data that Leonora and others have been sharing with me over the past couple months. I think it's been a couple months since I've been on your show.
Yes.
And I'll basically let Leonora, which is one of my current guides, lead me forward. Leonora, I explain, is the second emissary for the sun. So she is a being that has lived on the sun, and she's an expert in social human experiences, including relationships and our interrelational experiences. But she is from beings that live on the sun, much like humans live on the earth. It's another dimensional experience. If you were to see Leonora in person, she'd be, 60, 80 feet tall, something like that. It's not exactly someone that I meet physically. It's just someone that I get telepathic communication with, as I do with my other guides. My other guides are the sun, the planet Earth, known as Gaia, and the void known as Logos, which is not entirely just about the void. But tonight we'll talk with Leonora and perhaps some other individuals that I've connected with, which I'll explain later. Leonora helped me to come to understand that a lot more about time and space, which, can get complicated, but she helped explain it really in a very simplistic way that I can sort of get it, and I'm really excited to be able to share some of that information here tonight.
Oh, that would be wonderful, Julien.
Right.
Yes, we're all interested in trying to understand this time. Is it at one point, or is it lineal sometimes? Go ahead.
So one way of understanding time is that, first off, everybody has their own personal experience. We can agree on this. But not only that, everyone is a personal creator of their own experience, right? We've heard that in law of attraction, the basics of law of attraction. And yet many people are not familiar with how we are each creating our own experience. And yet, what does everybody else have to do with our experience in this lifetime, right? If I'm as powerful as anyone else, exactly how does that work? How do gods interact with each other in a way, right? How do, Christ consciousnesses that we are interact? And so Leonora has helped in that, and helped in the understanding of time as space understood in another way. So time and space, in the way that you understand that they both contain distance, right? They both contain sort of like time has space because, there's this time and there's a future time and there's a past time. So it has its own sort of distance between points in it. So it has an element of space. Well, it's not only linear; it's also like a flat surface. It goes in many directions, and it's not even just a flat surface. It goes into three-dimensional surface. So imagine that you have 100 threads of string hanging from a chandelier. Okay, we'll just call it yarn or something. If you were to gather all those threads all at the same time with your hands and allow some of it to drop, basically you take one handful without bundling it all up together, and you're gathering together at an apex, right? And at that point, all the threads are hanging, from your hand below it. You're familiar with the sand clock, where the sand goes through this little point, and it ends up in an area below where it gives you like a timer kind of thing, an hourglass.
Yes.
The same thing with the strings. Imagine the strings come together. So basically, all probabilities in an individual's life come together, and you're like the hand clasping and making decisions about what's important in the present moment. And then they don't look like they go out in all directions below your hand. They seem to be, sort of gathered closer together below your hand, and that's what you call your consistent past. So essentially, all those threads come together, and what your experience is now having all those much more closer together. So you're sort of like bringing experiences together and leaving a trail of a consistent thread that you can sort of, if you wanted to, you can weave them together. You can do whatever with the threads that are much closer together below your hand. Is that a strong enough visual to understand?
I think I'm getting it. Yes,
okay.
The threads below the hand is like the past.
Is like the past, and they're much closer together because the other threads are maybe, several feet apart hanging from a chandelier. So you're basically gathering them together so that they're all touching each other, and then below is your past, and above you is the future with all the opportunities. So these are what we could understand as timelines, meaning if you wanted to focus gathering all the threads together underneath a particular thread, then one thread would have, you'd be closer to the origins of one thread versus another, okay? So as you're journeying and attracting and choosing reality through law of attraction, whether you're doing it consciously or not, you're making decisions that affect the outcome of your past, obviously. But you can only make those decisions in the present. Everything that you do in the present affects what you're going to get in the future and affects what you're going to see in the past. That's the easy part. The slightly more complex part is that everybody has their own. So when
just a minute. Julien, I couldn't hear you. We got a little bit of a glitch there in the sound.
Okay. So the tricky part is understanding that I have my own chandelier and you have your chandelier, and some of the threads are being shared between the chandeliers. Does that make sense? So we're sharing certain experiences. We can't share all the experiences. There's no way to share every experience that somebody else is going through. Okay? But we can share common threads, quite literally the concept of a common thread of thought or a common thread of experience, right?
Yes.
So we're sharing in that way potentials together, and then we share certain results together. And as we share, we can become close because our hands are close together holding similar things. So we have similar experiences, and that is where we derive what appears to be a consistent past, like a consistent history book or Akashic record. Okay? Now,
yes.
At the same time as we have chosen, the threads that we've chosen, whether consciously or unconsciously, there are a lot of threads that were not chosen. There are a lot of threads we didn't grab onto that were an option. And those threads actually still continue. Okay? And let's just say we want to reach out and grab some of those threads, we can. And we do that by choosing what we believe of the past. So let's just say, you weren't old enough to be around during World War II. And you could basically learn from the textbooks what occurred. You can be, you could have been there or what have you, but essentially you could have never had to factor in the fact that World War II existed if you never were introduced to it. Okay? And many would say, but World War II still happened. Though those that are saying that World War II still happened are the ones that are containing the threads, and what they're doing is they're sharing that thread with those that don't know. So say we've got a child like in the Jungle Book is born not knowing about human society, doesn't know about World War II, doesn't have that kind of information. That person quite literally can exist in a world where World War II is not an important concept to them at all. It's not a thread of thought that has a value or a significance. And that's fine. We don't judge them, and we don't send them to school and say you need to learn about World War II to prevent, the same mistakes in the future. But at any point with an aware, conscious being, they can acknowledge or decide to pass by the offer to understand that World War II existed. Much like the kids in school who don't listen in history class and they get like an F, right? They, more or less, if they focus more on World War II, they're going to have more World War II concerns in their life than those who did not. And that is where the past is always optional, just like the future. Okay? So in a sort of strange sort of way, we can decide to learn about the past as much as we want, but the amount of consistency that we see in the past is only what we've all agreed is all consistent for everyone. But the greater truth is that the past is not necessarily consistent with each one of us. Okay? We are in a world that it's been established that we will have a consistent past that we will all agree on. And even then, you're probably aware that the history books have been wrong and been intentionally written as wrong. Are you aware?
Oh, yes.
Right. So even the past, as true as it was up to the point where you gained the option to believe that it was false and that it was given to you false, it was actually your reality. You made decisions based on the fact that World War II happened the way that it did. What if you found out that, Hitler was actually some sort of magical unicorn and you had evidence to prove it in the now? Well, then everything that you'd heard about World War II and him being, whatever he was, almost is superfluous because you've got more direct evidence in the present than you have having lived in the past. Now, somebody else who lived through the Holocaust can say absolutely not. He was not a magical unicorn. It was a terrible tyrant, right? But in that place, as you choose your reality, you may accept that person's interpretation of their experience exactly the way they had it, or they can interpret and you can share, no, look, I've got evidence to suggest a unicorn. That person may say, I'm not even going to listen to you. You're off your rocker. I'm not going to listen. And we call each other crazy when we aren't able to make ends meet. We aren't able to share a thread of thought, right? And there's a lot of that in the world. And the greater management, I would call it management, but we're talking about like governments and cultures and neighborhoods and families. It's a lot easier if everyone is respecting a certain amount of the same experiences to work from. Because experiences and memories suggest a direction that you can go based on the past. It's like make a decision based on what you did before. So this idea of don't repeat, World War II again is one of the greater messages of World War II. Like, don't repeat that kind of history. And yet, it happened right after World War I. Like World War II happened right after they said, we're going to make sure World War II never happens. And yet,
yeah.
Right?
Yeah.
So, in this vein, those who are particularly dedicated to the idea of wars in this time, as you're aware, are trying to start a war because wars are profitable, you'll find out. They don't tell you that in history books because that's not a thread of thought that's going to work out real well. Because if you understand that war is profit, then many people are doing it for somebody else's pocketbook, which doesn't feel good. But, defending somebody who is in danger does feel good. So that's the reason, that's the thread of thought that they're having you hold, while on the other hand, they're holding the thread behind the scenes of making a profit and running a business.
Julien,
Yeah.
I'd like to interject perhaps at this point.
Uh-huh.
I've had a conversation recently about memories and personal history and things, and how I didn't understand until I went to my first high school reunion. So we all agreed in the room, that we had in our past gone to the same high school, knew each other as teenagers. But then when we started talking about events and things that happened in high school,
there was probably some disagreements.
Yeah, they would relate an incident, and they would say that I was at that party or at that sports event, and I would have no memory of being at that particular party. And then I would say something about, well, wasn't that fun the night we all went to the party on the college campus? And they'd say, well, what are you talking about? I don't remember anything like that.
Right.
And it was very strange that at the top of my mind, when I think of XYZ person in my past, I think of such and such events, and they're not thinking about those events at all. And I kept a diary and wrote down things, but I don't know. It's just, and even recently, some things have happened, like just a few weeks ago, and I was talking to someone, and that was there, but they claim they were not there, that event didn't happen. And I was kind of startled, and I was beginning to wonder, gosh, is this another one of the signs that we're going into 5D, that we're remembering our rather recent past differently?
Correct. See, our experience in this sort of matrix illusory experience is based on consistency. Everything is solid, like you can knock on wood, because you've established that wood is made from trees, and trees just don't go away. They stay there even after you've chopped them down and you've dried them out, right? Now, that's true, but trees also rot away. How do you know that the wood of your door or your table has been treated or not? Well, you make certain assumptions that if you want to make a table, you have to treat it, but you don't need to know that. You just need to know that, at 5 years old, that tables don't fall apart on you and rot away, all of a sudden. You understand certain principles that everyone agrees on in which how the world operates, and you accept that. And that holds a degree of consistency. So essentially anything that's repeated, it's like a song that's going in your head and you can't forget it. Anything that's repeated becomes more solid because it's a request for its existence to be such. Okay? Whether verbally or whether you witness something over and over and over again, it's a call to action for you to invest your conscious awareness into making it more real. So the more you focus on something, the more it's real. So therefore, the less you focus on something, the more it can become unreal. As in, you forget things if you don't repeat your thoughts. Does that make sense? Literally, your history gets erased behind you for one reason only. There's one reason why we don't have a photographic memory. It's because we would be stuck in that exact period in time. If you had a photographic memory, everything would be exactly the way it was when you were 5 years old. Technology would not advance. Cultures would not advance. The world would hardly move at all. We'd be all back, in my case, in the early 80s.
Another conversation I had recently, my friend explained that people who do have a photographic memory are basically insane, and that there's only 47 of those people on the planet.
There's very few people, correct. And yes, those who have photographic memory have a degree of suffering in that experience. Okay? They almost suffer more than anyone else because they cannot explore a degree of creative potential, because everything that they understand surpasses what they're able to consider. As in, everything is the way it is and it shall not change. because they basically are able to factor all the probabilities based on past examples. If you remember exactly how everything was, you will get exactly everything how it was, just about. You see? So you can actually re-experience the past by focusing on the past. Now, our ability to forget, whether it be natural or an intention that we forget something, it's very difficult to intend to forget something, as you're aware, is a product of us basically replacing memories with newer ones. We're not interested in remembering everything. We're interested in the creative potential of change. And in the creative potential of change, it requires us to be a certain amount of flexible. For a certain amount of flexible of letting go of things. In some cases, the things that we hold on to the most, the things that bother us. Because those things we don't know how to let go. We don't know how to let go of maybe someone who was murdered that was close to us. So we make it a part of our life to try to prevent that from happening. And we will spend the rest of our life, if that's our direction, being around preventing that from happening. We may accomplish it to some degree. As long as we find excitement and joy in the process of bringing it forward, more so than focusing on the fear and the anxiety and the discomfort of it. If there's fear, anxiety, and discomfort, then it will remain. You need to be able to transcend that. If you want to move to a world where you have more choices, if you want to get your fears and discomforts out of the way, you got to forgive them or let them go, or basically understand why they were a gift to you and why they were actually positive versus a negative experience. And that way, positive vibration, positive energy is much more dynamic than negative energy. Negative energy is much more stagnant and doesn't have a lot of options, doesn't have a lot of choices. So as we're moving into fifth dimensional reality, it's about being happy if you want more choices and you want to have more life experiences under your belt to choose from. That's it. You be happy, you get more choices in your future. You find a way to transcend your fears and your discomforts by either finding a way of letting them go, forgiving them, or resolving them in such a way that you are looking at the past experiences as some form of benefit. Gathering life experience. And note, since God does not judge anything as good or bad, it's up to the individual perceiver to determine if it's good or bad for them. You can actually change your opinion. Much like someone can tell you that Hitler never died, and he shows you evidence that Hitler is actually a unicorn. Be like, wow, I can change my mind. And many would say, I need to see evidence in order to change my mind. And that's where most people get caught up. They're using the outside world to suggest what they should believe, when in fact, it's all based on a personal individual's repetition of experience that makes something believable. So that's part of the challenge, right, of ascending.
Yes.
The first step, of course, the easiest way to do this in the process of ascending is to get through all your fears, process your fears, get over your fears, figure out what holds you back, as in holds you in a lower vibrational experience or reaction, like a trigger. If somebody says something and you're all, love and joy, but if they say something, then you're like a total wreck and you can't handle it. Like if you were there and somebody cussed out your mother and did a really bad, your mother sort of joke, you'd lose it, even if you're, a wonderful light being. So in that experience or a similar experience, you may not be able to recover and just move into the light. It may be, there's a lot of factors regarding that. There's a lot of things with your mother that you actually wished she was never disrespected, and you wish you were never disrespected. And this whole idea of disrespect is actually a really big phenomenon that you don't know how to overcome, that affects, the self-awareness of not knowing whether you're a good or wrong or right person. It affects the self-esteem, and you just hate individuals who harp on people's self-esteem. And yet, if you understood that people only joke or only harm each other because that dissipates their own fear, you say, well, he was just doing it to save his own skin. And what he really needs to know is that he doesn't have anything to fear either. Right? So you shed light on the experience. You bring light to the experience. You bring love, as they say. If you can bring love, don't assume you can always bring love. You may not be ready to. But when you can, try to bring an uplifting or shifting it from very uncomfortable to less uncomfortable even. And you're moving into a direction where there are more choices. Fifth dimensional life is simply described by the Pleiadians as an environment in which you have more choices, a whole lot less right and wrong, and a whole lot less black and white, and much more a colorful spectrum of choices in which none of the choices are wrong. You just get to explore as you wish. And you don't bump into each other, saying, you can't do that, you're not allowed to do that. Everyone does that which they wish without limitation, because everyone understands that everybody's in the same boat. Okay?
Yes. We've been talking about going into 5D on several of my shows. And
yeah.
And that some of us, including myself, have been having some nightmares, and Chris Jacobs has channeled that those are memories of past experiences, maybe in this lifetime or another lifetime, and that we have to process and clear those bad situations out. Use a lot of forgiveness with them.
Right. Basically, it's very simple for your audience and for yourself. It's as simple as find a way to make either that experience beneficial or leave it in some direction where you feel good about it. Now, feeling good is the place where you're not, you don't feel good if you're putting somebody else down to lift yourself up. So the feeling good is always a win-win. It's always looking for the win-win for you and whoever else is involved.
Candy, can I interject here just really quick? You guys, this is profound. Welcome, Julien. Monday call and last night call, we're talking about belief, believing, and faith. And we've journeyed through that, and it's like now synchronicities abound. You're coming here and telling the nuts and bolts of it. This is just awesome.
Yeah,
so, in the 5D energy, the big words I would say is believe and faith, right?
Yes. Belief, also association with believe, is be life. Be that which is your life. Because your life is a process of existing with what you are existing as. As you exist, life will come to you. So be life. And therefore, beliefs follow it. Belief is almost like the evidence of who you are, in a way. In that
absolutely. And another profound, the question we asked ourselves after we talked about believing and faith last night is, how could we practice that? Well, you just gave us a clue in all your dissertation is repetition of believing and faith. Yeah.
If you're familiar with, if you look at the essence of vibration, it's a repeated wavelength, right? You look at like a sound wave on a computer or something, it's a wavelength. It's repeating. Okay, it's a repetitional wavelength of energy. So as you repeat, your body is actually quite adaptive. Funny enough, it's very, very adaptive because it's mostly made of water, and water is very fluid and able to change. Okay, it's a lot of the elements that are not liquid that actually retain memories in your body. Things like the muscles. It's funny to hear that a lot of your memories are stored in your muscles. But in fact, so that's the whole part of having a healthy body and a detoxified body, is it allows you to move through your thoughts and memories a lot easier. Because if your circulatory system's good, then and you're exercising your muscles, then your muscles are constantly getting refreshed, and your memories are too. I did not know that for basically forever until recently. That's why healthy body, healthy mind.
No, it's funny. Just 2 days ago, I decided to start drinking a gallon of water a day. Woohoo! Yeah. That's good.
Yeah, it is, and it supports the circulation. and detoxification. It really does. I would even go so far as to recommend distilled water, since distilled water has no water is a lot like a sponge, okay? It's like a train, a passenger train without people in it. Okay? And so water can carry stuff. And the more that it's a pure water, as it has no elements in it or an imbalance of certain molecules like oxygen or hydrogen, distilled water is a perfect balance of H2O, it can carry more. It can help the circulation move things around your body more. So it tends to draw out that which is not wanted. So if there's things that you want that's not wanted, and you're progressing vibrationally beyond which is what is not wanted, water will literally help you detox your energetic state. It's the most significant thing, is drinking a lot of water.
And one more point. So okay. I asked a weird question the other day, and one of the things is drink more water. Well, it's like, come on, let's get on with the show. What can I do? Water. Right?
Yes. Water is the number one medicine. You'll also note that water has consciousness. And I believe it was Dr. Emoto who proved that water holds can hold vibrational words spoken to it when it was frozen, and when the water was frozen quickly, and you would look in a microscope at the water and notice that depending on what words were focused on the water, you would get different molecular shapes in it. And the words that were very negative that were said showed some very discomforting, nasty-looking images. And the ones that had love and high vibrational intentions with it looked very crystalline and pure and very cohesive. Hard to explain, worth looking up. But water itself, it basically can take on vibration. And you are a vibration. So when it goes into you, your water turns into you. But what you can do is you can set intentions in water, like blessing it, like holy water, and it can live out a time with that intention before your body sort of adopts it as its own family member in its own water body.
How do you make holy water, Julien?
Set intentions and set the
boil the hell out of it. Boil the hell out of it. Okay, I'm done, you guys.
Okay.
Okay. Well, I'd like to share a few personal things here, Julien.
Okay.
When I was in high school senior, the English teacher asked us to write a paper and set our intentions as to what we would be doing when we were 28.
Yes.
And that was quite interesting. And a few years later, I met my husband and shared some of this. A few years later, things began to happen that I had written down when I was 18. And he joked for years and talked to the kids about, everything your mom, everything we're doing, your mom planned years and years ago.
Yeah.
And it all came true, and it was so amazing like that. And
yeah, you can literally write your future. And in fact, you do it whether you're aware that you're doing it or not. So this awakening process is becoming aware that you are creator. You always have been.
Right.
Yes.
And of course, I was a child of divorce, and I wanted to have a future where I didn't have a divorce. And I had a mother and a father that sat at the table with children, and I got that kind of future, and that was fabulous. And another thing, when we would talk as a family about, the kids would ask my husband before he died, what did he do when he was a little boy in school and different things, and he only had 2 or 3 stories to repeat. And I knew thousands of details about my life, and I was always confused about how my husband could not have remembered his past, and I remembered all of mine. And then as my children got older, they can't remember their past either. They have very little memory of what happened when they were children, and now they're 30-somethings, and I've been a little surprised of why they can't remember things, and a couple of them never have any dreams that they remember. Seems strange to me.
If you want to understand who you are at the very present moment, and in any present moment, it's a product of everything that you recall, everything that you can think about or remember having thought about, everything that you can remember, that's you. Okay? So you're actually a product of what you can remember. And so if you're growing into a new being, there may be memories that just don't basically factor into who you're becoming. Right? It's like some of the lessons you learned in grade 1 in grade school, they may have been foundational, but you don't remember it because you're off in calculus land and you're in the world of calculus. You're not in the world of, counting numbers, you see. And so just like you walk down the street to the grocery store, you don't remember walking, but you did walk. You had to, at least to get there. But it's not a retained memory because it doesn't serve a function for who you are at the grocery store. Who you are at the grocery store is you're a grocer. You're a shopper.
And of course, my children are active in the technological age. But when they were children, there was no internet and Wi-Fi and cell phones, and so the things that they did then really don't apply to their lives now.
Correct. Including learning. Because, they didn't have iPads in school when they were little, but now almost every classroom has some sort of tablet. Like a touch device. You couldn't even imagine that would exist 30 years ago. It's all, writing in with pencils on, loose leaf paper. And, go back another 50 years or more, it was writing on chalk tablets. Right? So.
But I remember, and they don't, well, it's not, it's, and I thought these things out. Anyway, I appreciate what you've been sharing, and I don't know if we've kind of finished that part. Maybe my audience is a little more interested in your Lanera and her life on the sun.
So Leonara does not talk about much about her life on the sun because we can't really relate to it. It does have like a body form, arms, legs, head, that sort of thing. And there are males and females, and there's some other that are somewhere in between. But fundamentally, they live a very advanced life that someday we can attain in our own way. We're all sort of like becoming like a being like on the sun. And in fact, the sun and the earth are beings in themselves. Okay?
Yes.
So
yes.
You're familiar with like the reptilian species, right? You've got snakes, but then you've got like alligators, and you've got like dinosaurs, all sort of reptilian. Well, some reptiles have larger brains than others, right? And so they appear to be more evolved and more capable and possibly even larger than the others. This is no different. They're living in that environment. Now, the difference between the sun and the earth is like one of the sun's children. Much like you could say a salamander or an amphibian is related to the reptiles, but doesn't get very large like the reptiles do. It's kind of like slightly similar, slightly lives a similar experience, but doesn't exactly. So
Gaia comes to my call sometimes, and Chris channels her.
Yeah, She's pretty freaking awesome. She's one of my main guides, and she always knows how to sort of put things at peace and put things into perspective. Because we're essentially...
She's trying to clean up our atmosphere and heal herself without killing us.
Correct. Much like your mother tries to heal herself without involving you so much to heal her for her. Like it's still a part of her own responsibility. It's her own responsibility to include us if we're litter bugs or pollution, offering pollution to her. But she loves us, so she does not exactly discard us verbatim for doing things that would be uncomfortable to her persistence, to her life.
Yes. Now, I know that you've been talking to those who have passed over. I don't know if you're open to, I don't know if you can channel some of those beings, if any of my people on the call can ask you to channel a particular person that's passed over, or if you want to talk in general.
I would say that would probably need to be reserved for a lot larger span of time. In which case, anybody can book time on my schedule, and you can find the ability to book time with me at julienwells.com. But it's not so much that I wanted to speak about people that are passed over. I wanted to talk about people who went into what we would call the ascended sphere, the ascended state of heaven. Now, there's multiple heavens. I know that can be kind of and jarring for people who are not familiar with that. And the multiple heavens are actual places. We have like this light, airy-fairy concept of like heaven or whatever. Well, heaven includes living in a body often enough. And most often, people prefer keeping a body. And so maybe we can keep this subject to another talk because it can get quite large very quickly. But if you want, I could do a very quick summary, even if it goes over people's heads.
But Julien, the many heavens kind of goes back to all the strings we're holding on to. We each got our own heaven kind of thing. Would you say that?
Correct. Heaven is more like a dimension. And a dimension is a way of perceiving your experience. So we'll say people who live like super like hippie and lovey and everything like that, they live in a different dimension than people who are, scraping by every day, just trying to pay bills or being hounded by, debt collectors. Right? You can say, wow, you're living in a heaven. You can say people who are living with lots and lots of money are living in a heaven too. But really, there is a heaven in which the angels describe it more succinctly, but it's more apt to speak to those who have essentially gone through the ascension phase and are living in a world where ascension has already occurred for them. Okay? They've already done their personal ascension, and we would call these the ascended masters. But not necessarily masters. They're just like regular people that have ascended. People who just happen to do exactly what was necessary to ascend. And that was be happy. So there's this world where there's all these really happy people, and what they did is they let go of the thread that we were holding on to, where we weren't holding on to the threads that made us as happy as they were. And these are some people you'd be familiar with. So there's a thread in which they go off on their own journey, and we get a weird story like they died. But in fact, they didn't die. They went on to live their life in a more perfect way, and we needed an excuse for them to leave where we couldn't follow them. Does that make sense? Somewhat. So individuals like John Lennon, Michael Jackson, Robin Williams, they all are like spirits to us at this point, and yet they live in their own world not being spirits. We can only connect with them like they were spirits. But in fact, they're living a world that should we ascend in our own most perfect, wonderful way that we can see ourselves in our creator potential and love that potential, there's potential for us revisiting them as long as we're open to that being possible. Almost like, oh, we made a mistake. Michael Jackson just ran away. Oh, we made a mistake. John Lennon just ran away, and here he is again. Almost like Andy Kaufman. People are not sure if he ran away, he faked his death or not. in this environment, he's there. You see. You want to see Andy
Well, I certainly expect to meet all those people and to meet my relatives and everything, you know. And you know, this Candy Shop show is an outgrowth of the WASPy conference calls I did for 3 years about the different levels and places in heaven. You had said something about, you know, we don't die. Were you talking? I mean, I was a member of a group of people that believed that we were supposed to visualize that we did not ever have to lose our body shell, you know, that we could live forever, and not
Correct.
and not have the typical dying experience.
Correct.
I don't know if that was the kind of thing you meant about not
Correct.
dying, about keeping this.
Correct, but you don't
form.
need to visualize. You just need to figure out how you can be happy all the time, which is repeating the things that make you happy.
Which,
Okay.
when you say you don't need to visualize, that means don't have any expectations, right? Just be happy.
Visualization is an attempt to make a change in a particular moment, but all you need is steady application to exactly what you want to do. Death, essentially, is a point that you can choose to return back to life. You know how you, leave your body and you go up? That happens, okay? You do get to leave your body and go up, and you can decide to come back into your body. Exactly as it is. However, there is something that no one talks about because it's not congruent with how people understand time and space. You can go back 6 years and return there and continue living life as if the last 6 years didn't happen. Not only that, but that is occurring. There's parts of you from the future that are coming back and telling you, you know what, I don't go down that road. Don't do that. I've tried it. I've seen it, and it's very subtle. But you don't get the whole download. You don't have the whole, future version Akashic memory of it all happening, because then you wouldn't be in the game. You wouldn't be in the illusion, exploring the illusion. But once you're out, you're like, oh, this is just a game of Monopoly? This is just a game of checkers? That's all it is? But it's really fun when I didn't know it was a game of checkers. So to go back and continue to enjoy it, I have to not know. That's one of the stipulations, because if you told everybody that you didn't die, that's actually one of the most critical points in the game, is to don't keep talking about the fact that the game is just a game, because everybody will be like, shut up, just enjoy the game. You see. So death is one of the things that holds the game together, as in avoid death, and you will get to explore basically anything you want. Death occurs when you see no more options. That's like saying, I got no more moves in the game of Monopoly. You know, game is bust. I have no more moves in checkers. I can't see any options. I'm out of options. I've focused on the limitations so much so, all I have is limitations, and it's just no fun. I can't find my joy anymore. So you get to that point, and yes, you die in the traditional sense. You get to walk up, step above your body, and say, oh, that's all it was about. You get to go back, and you get to choose. Now, do you leave loved ones behind? That's up to you. If you want, you can go back just 5 seconds and change your mind. But when you go back and you've forgotten that you died, you go back 5 seconds to the point where you weren't there, you have to not go back to the exact same past. You need to go back to a past in which you were going to live more than 5 more seconds, you see. You need to choose a different reality. And say, you know what, this reality with, my best friend showing up and giving me hope, that's enough to keep me going a little bit longer, and see how long that goes. Yeah, maybe you live another 2 weeks because you basically found a way to have your best friend show up, and you chose that before you went back into your body, mind you. And then you say, okay, my best friend showed up. I lived another 2 weeks, but I still died. I still saw hopelessness. I wasn't able to get there. It's like, well, you're probably going to have to go back into the past more. Maybe more like 6 weeks. Start over from there. And so you get these insights in your life, and you get these sort of like downloads, which you don't call downloads. You just say, I don't think I should do that. I'm not going to do that anymore. Or this feels like a good idea, because they're kind of like suggestions from other timelines of the same you. That gets confusing. and yet that is how it works with the threads. Your soul doesn't care how many lives you're running. It just cares that it's growing and creating and expanding its potential. Lives are like lives in a video game of Mario Brothers. You get to keep going. You start over maybe at the beginning of the level, as in you got to go back some progress in order to basically not end up in the same, jumping into the same pit the way you did, or get eaten by a piranha plant or something. But you learn from it and you say, well, okay. But if you knew that it wasn't a game and you can just reprogram it, like Neo in the Matrix, well then it would not serve as an experience of growth. It would be just serving as being a programmer. Now that is a world that we're transitioning into. That's a world where we are much more hands-on in the creation of everything. Not completely hands-on, but more. And so we expand in the direction where in order for us to feel like a creator, we need to feel like we've got opportunities to create something. We can't just say, I can't do anything because I got taxes, I got bills, I got, the kids. I can't do these things because I got all these commitments I can't change. But when you find your higher vibration and you explore your higher vibration, which is basically exploring your excitement, because that leads you into a higher vibration, doing that more and more and more, you get to live a world of higher vibration. And in higher vibration, there's more choices. If you look at the scale of a vibrating wave, and it goes from a high pitch to a low pitch, high vibration and low vibration, high vibration simply means that there's more oscillations within a span of time. Quite literally means you can choose any of 3 oscillations in this octave, then when you go down an octave, you only have so many, oscillations to choose from there. So the vibration is all about having more choice within a span of time, and being able to explore more choices. And so exploring fifth dimensional life is going to require moving away from right and wrong, as in you only have this choice or that choice, into the awareness that you have a multiplicity of options in which you can explore, and that occurs when you're not down in the dumps. Down in the dumps means I'm either, running or I'm fighting, fight or flight. That's like the most symbolic representation of the lowest element of fear. You either fight or you run. You've got 2 options. But when you're practicing the higher energies, including those energies that come equipped in the body, such as your such as your connection with higher self through crown chakra, your chakras, exploring these and practicing these, you will find you literally have more to choose from in life. In fact, in my position, I almost have too many things to do. I have too many things to consider that are exciting. I'm able to talk with Pleiadians. I could spend the rest of my life just talking with them until I eventually get to be with them, being just like them. And then I realized, well, Pleiadians, they wouldn't dare touch, a video game where you shoot people. But for me, it's not shooting people. For me, it's a playful adventure of strategy. And I don't, see killing people as the actual killing of people. It's a virtual element. There's no judgment in that environment. I can go ahead and kill computer people all day. But the thing is, Pleiadians wouldn't. They would be a little bit too shocked by that. They'd be like, it looks too real. I can't tell if it's a real person or not. That's what a Pleiadian would say. I suppose the game's not for you. That's why you're not quite ready you're not exactly in my world, exactly the way I see it. Okay? So everyone cannot really, everybody needs to find their personal joy, because that's the only way you're ever going to raise your vibration, if you're following who you are and what you love. And that's very dynamic, as in it changes, and it's very personal. As you're following that personal path of your excitement, you are becoming more the real you. You are becoming more you of a higher vibrational state, which is a you as a creator, like the way that your higher self knows you and the way that your soul knows you you're God. You want to realize you're more God, you need to exercise like God. God has options. You want to live with options, explore higher vibration. I know I went on a bit of a tirade there. I wasn't meant to be too pushy, but I'm trying to be as clear as I can possibly be.
Well, you're doing a great job of it, Julien. And yes, on the Candy Shop Show, we talk about the joy of sweet candies and finding our personal joy, whatever it's going to be. And it's great to have you enforce those concepts that we certainly embrace here.
Wonderful. Well, have you seen the movie? Just one last point. You've seen the movie Groundhog Day with Bill Murray?
Yes.
You know where he wakes up every morning? The difference between that movie and real life is that he remembers the days before, but essentially it works like that. You wake up from your sleep. When you go to sleep, there is so much gallivanting around other realities that you just can't remember them because they're just so awesome and so different. But that's the thing. Nobody wants to play chess for the rest of their lives. They want to explore some other things. So what do? You go to sleep and get time off from human life. You get to explore a little bit off the beaten path of human life. And then, you might spend some time planning out what you're going to do the next day and some of the things that are going to occur. And you work with your guides, all those that don't have the human life that you're having, and you make plans with them, your guides and your friends and spirits. They all sort of help you out in the ways that they can get involved without breaking the rules of just popping into a physical manifestation in front of you and saying, hey, I'm going to give you a hand, because that's not consistent. It's not consistent. It hasn't been practiced. If you want an angel to appear or something like that, then you just need to practice that thought over and over and over again. It doesn't matter if you don't believe it. It's going to happen whether you believe it or not. That's why we've got television. That's why we've got advertising and marketing. It's all based on that principle. It's the only way you get success. Doesn't matter. You can see, like the bumblebee from the Cheerios. Your brain doesn't care that it's a cartoon. It really doesn't. The mind does not, the subconscious does not make a distinction between what is real and what is not real, because you know what? It's all potentially real. Now, you might ask, well, I don't see cartoon characters running around the place. I don't exactly see cartoons flying around because I watch a lot of cartoons and that's not happening. Well, that's because there's a dissociative relationship with that. It's not close enough to your actual reality. It only shares a certain amount of concepts, but the concepts can still occur. Now, that doesn't mean that a rock's going to fall on your head like Wile E. Coyote in the Roadrunner, okay? But it might mean that you bop your head within 24 hours of getting really emotional about seeing the coyote getting destroyed over and over again. So there's vibrational similarities that line up together in what you practice.
And we all must remember to set our intentions and to know that we can create our own future, and we need to plan the kind of future that we want. And we need to because it's going to happen whatever we plan, but we need to consciously plan and plan it with a lot of joy.
Yeah, if you don't want to do it by default, and if you don't want to do it by what everyone is inviting you to think, and you just listen to what everybody says, but you can create by having an intention and having everybody bring it to you, and you don't actually have to choose anything. You just say, I want to live around beautiful people and wonderful people.
And hey, Julien, that's a great lead-in for my announcement that I have been progressing and setting up a intentional spiritual commune, and I want to announce that I have room for a few openings, and if anybody here or in YouTube land would like to contact Candy in regards to her community, then they can contact me at t2truth@yahoo.com. Of my Ozark Dawn spiritual community.
That's pretty exciting. You hear that, everybody?
It is. The folks that have just joined in the last 5 weeks, it's very exciting what's going. We're reforming the community and the land that I started long ago when my husband was alive, and we're reforming something new and wonderful and joyous if anybody wants to get in on it.
That sounds fantastic. I wish you all the most joy in that experience. And I expect you will have a lot of wonderful stories to tell about those friends you make.
Absolutely.
Julien,
Absolutely.
Julien, can we ask questions from you? Hello?
But we could have a couple of quick questions, Julien.
Yeah, I got to go in a couple minutes, but I can take a couple questions.
Hello? Can you hear me?
Yes.
Julien, thank you, first of all, so much for your applied version of spiritual living. It's really very helpful. That detail is very helpful.
Thank you.
So a couple of questions. One was, what is déjà vu then if we are feeling we have gone through this again? Is that the same as what we have come back, like time
Correct.
travel back to ourselves? Okay.
Correct.
So that's time. Okay.
It's your own
That's
self-time traveling, yes. You've actually done it before. You're actually coming back to a point that you already lived from a future point that returned to the past, and you came back. You're like re-looping a very specific moment that was very, it almost matched exactly the same thing. Most of the time when you start on a new timeline, there's not a lot the same. You're exploring whole new directions of vibrations and experiences. But every once in a while, you get the exact same equation. It's almost like a time marker, a time stamp that sets you in, that says you don't need to rewind past this point anymore. You've come to a really great place, and rewinding into the past beyond this moment means that you've done an incredible job, and everybody basically goes out, explores the future, and probably comes back to this reset point as the oldest point.
Okay. So now, one other quick question. You mentioned that, like the strings you hold on to, if you're focusing on something, that becomes your reality. I was thinking about, recently I've become introduced to some of these ideas about archons and this and that and that and that, what's going on. It was always something, I kind of inherently felt something is going on, but I never knew the words and stuff about it.
Correct.
Does that kind of information being on YouTube and people having access to it who do not already know about it, is that one of the purposes to create that as a reality for people who never really thought of it as a reality? Is that, people who do that have a good intention of informing people. I can see that. However, it has a double-edged sword, right?
So it's a good intention if you believe that someone can take that information and make something good come of it, of that information. But if you follow that information and you can't find a way of making something good come of it, then you're really just depressing yourself.
I see.
So if you feel that you can make something good of it, then I would say that that's a good choice to take from the buffet table.
Okay.
That's all
the
there is.
string you hold on to.
That existence exists. Just like the existence where John Lennon never died also exists. You're just not in that world right now.
Right.
Okay?
Okay, great.
You're
Thank
in a world
you.
where there's probably people who would shoot John Lennon.
Or Elvis Presley when hasn't died.
Or Elvis Presley.
We like to
is that alive. The funny thing is that all these people, they actually live together. There's a world called Cloud 9 in the form of heaven, because we think of it as like totally awesome, but really it's just another reality where everyone's super ecstatic and enjoying their creative life endeavors. Okay?
Okay.
Just like those who are homeless and scraping by, they live in a form of hell. The people that are living in fear constantly, they're living in a version of hell, which is actually still called a heaven, because a human life is still very heavenly compared to being a rock or a carrot or a bumblebee.
But that's kind of, if they are living homeless, for example, maybe they are trying to experience that feeling of what it's like to be homeless.
Well,
right?
you are where you are because you're exploring.
Right.
You are where you are with exploring. Maybe you say, "Oh, I want to go, explore the Amazon." Some people think that's exciting. Some people think that's terrifying. It's up to you.
Right. Well, thank you so much for explaining. All the best to you.
Very welcome.
Thank you for the questions. Thank you, Julien. Have a wonderful evening with your family there in Seattle. And I'm sure we'll be talking to you again someday.
Yeah, I hope so. Just a reminder, if you ever want to find anything about me, I do have a website, julienwells.com. I mentioned that before. And you can find my links to my YouTubes, to basically booking time to talk with me and following my Facebook feeds and things like that.
Wonderful. And may all of us experience the highest good of all concerned in our individual and our group worlds on this timeline. Thank you all.
Good night.
Good night.
Are you looking for healing or a change in your life to help you enjoy it more fully? You might benefit from a galactic energy reading and clearing from Chris Jacobs. Chris will work with you on a soul level to clear unseen negative influences, implants, programs, contracts, and energetic blocks. Chris Jacobs is a gifted energy healer. Contact him today at ChristopherStephenJacobs@gmail.com.